Hi everyone, welcome to my Shoreline studio. I'm Sybille Muschik, behind the camera is Joshua Blanc. Now today we're talking about watermarks, and they've been around for a long time, since 1282 by the way. And they were used in paper products, things like stamps and money and so forth, at that time to discourage counterfeiting, and I think probably even used to this day. Now, I like to do it, I love making paper every once in a while, and I have a project to do, so we'll show you a little bit of something about watermarks. Okay, so starting off here, I have sewn a little, now this is really difficult because you're sewing into these tiny little squares, and this is just stuff you use for your windows, screen stuff, and it's just plastic. You can get the metal screening, but this will work. And then I laboriously sold, I sold it twice. The first time it was just a little too dense, and I'll show you some of the pieces I made with that. And this one, at least you can read it, so sewing is not my forte. But some people who are into quilt making as well as printmaking, they can certainly do this and create paper and sew into it. Lots of people do that, so it's lots of fun to do. So we're just going to now. I've got a embroidery hoop here, and I found that this works really good for paper making. So, and it has a little screw, I guess, on it to tighten up, and you can just get it really nice and tight. Okay, and I've placed it so that it's reasonably in the center. Okay, so in the vat, now we do have an episode, and we'll post that about paper making, so I won't take you through the entire process again. But basically, you just have some paper, you tear it up, you put it in a blender, let it soak for a little while, and then whir it, and you have paper pulp. In this one I have some from a previous session, which is on the green side. So we're going to throw some in here, not too much. Now if you are reusing handmade paper like the pulp, and you want to keep it, throw it in the freezer, and when you take it out, make sure you boil it for quite a while. Arches watercolor paper, if you're using that, smells a little moldy when you wet it. Anyway, so be sure and boil it. It's just to be on the safe side. I have a little wooden spoon. I'm going to stir it up quite a bit. You can do it with your hands, of course. And I just have a little plastic container, the vat. And I've also put some iridescent glitter. This is neon glitter. You just get it at the dollar store. Now be careful with this stuff because it gets everywhere, and you just want to use it very judiciously. So the little tops come on and have little holes there. So you can just chuck a little bit in there. And because it's in water, it'll stay there. If it gets into the air, it's very troublesome, so be careful. But what it does, it adds just a little bit of shimmer to your paper, which at this time of year, when it's Christmas time or close to, that's quite lovely. So here we have our little embroidery hoop. And now, the way to do a watermark is to, like I said, to sew it, or they used to use metal wire actually. And the watermarks, if you know about Arches watercolor paper, they have quite a good watermark on the bottom. And sometimes for some watercolor artists, that's a bit of a pain. Either you want to show the mark because you want to show that you're using excellent watercolor paper, or you don't want to because it might interfere with your composition. Either way is good. Okay, so we swirl our water, make sure all the paper pulp is floating nicely. And you dip down, gently bring it up. Keep your fingers off the sides if you can. Let it drain. And then what I do is I take a sponge to the back and try and get as much water out as I can. Make sure your watermark is covered with paper. If it isn't, then just touch like this to the water, and then it all comes off again. And then you can just redo it. But this one looks not too bad. And the round shape is really quite interesting. You know, most times you have a square, and we'll do a piece with just regular paper in a few minutes. And you can actually see that the sewing is embedded. Now, not all watermarks were readable. Some are more obscure and you have to look for them. Probably in currency that would be true. Maybe the stamps as well. But in this case, we're trying to read piece, right? Okay, now we're going to couch it onto a piece of, it's just cotton sheet material. I've got several pieces. And so you turn it upside down and you place it on there. Undo your little screw. Then you can lift that top decal off. And this one. And again, sponge it a lot. Just get off as much water as you can. Now paper will take on the surface structure of any object it's couched onto. That's what it's called, is couching. When you're placing wet paper on top of, you know, some surface. So if you want a really smooth surface, you might try Formica. If you want a different surface, then for texture, you know, that's good too. Okay, let's see if we can get the screen up. Sometimes it's a little stubborn, but it's coming up not too bad. Just a little bit there. And you can see the impression that it's made in the paper. So what we'll do is we'll just take it off of there. I'll give it to Josh to place in a safe place. And we'll dry it. I'm just going to dry it with, you know, an iron. Just iron it. It's be nice and flat that way. If it dries naturally, it will be like a wet paper drying, of course. So it'll be quite wrinkly and it will shrink quite a bit. So using an iron helps a lot. Next up is I did this out of craft foam, and this was the original design. And this is a project I'm trying to make. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do the paper, and we're going to couch it on top of here. And we'll do it that way first, and then we're going to try couching it twice so that it actually does become a watermark. This way it's just going to be an embossing or debossing. Embossing is when it sits on the surface, it's raised. When debossing is when it goes down. So it has a little bit of both here. Okay, so here's how I did the star. I did a computer copy and put the lettering in there. Then I placed it backwards on here. There's carbon paper under here. And then I traced it onto the foam. And then once it got traced on there, I cut it out. I cut this part first. I cut the star, this part separate, and then I used some spray adhesive, and I put the two together. So that's how I got the star. And then to get the lettering, I put it under my screen. I tried several different Posca pens, but the silver worked the best, and that's why there's different colors on there. And then I just traced it out, and then I sewed it as best as I could. So there you go. So you could do that with any design, and that way you'll get a nice embossing, and it really is an embossing. Now I have an extra piece of screen on top of here. Sometimes if you have trouble getting it off the screen onto your surface, in this case that will definitely happen because we have this star shape. Okay, so basically this is just screen, and I just taped it. You can use staple it down. You could probably use an elastic to hold it in place. Whatever works for you. Okay, so once more into the fray here. So you just sort of have to hold everything together. Again, this is the screen part, this is the decal. Okay, and then again, just put it down. The decal just gives you a nice edge. You can do it free form if you like. And then just let it drain. Now I'm going to do what I said earlier, because this edge isn't very nice. So what you just touch it to the water and it all comes off. And we should still have plenty of paper pulp in there. Put it in. Just gently shake it from side to side. Now that's much better. And that looks like a nice sheet of paper. Maybe. Okay, just take off the side. A little rough on the top, but that's okay. And again, you can use a sponge on the bottom. Now, some screens have little wooden pieces on the back where you can't do this kind of thing, but then you just have to do it from the top. That's fine. And I'm trying to get as much of the water off as I can. You can see some of the sparkles a little bit. You just want, for the sparkles, don't get carried away. You just want sort of an elegant shimmer. Okay, so we're going to cooch this onto our star shape. Make sure that's square. And again, process. Take out as much water as you can. Okay, I'm going to lift off this screen, and you can see the star shape covered in paper underneath there. Now this is where you have to be pretty careful. And really get into those edges. And then hopefully, ooh, look at that. And you can really see that shape. Now, if you made several of these, you could just leave it on top of the foam until it dries, but we don't have that luxury. So we are going to flip it and then remove it. Hopefully it's going to cooperate. Just be gentle and it'll come away. There we go. Now, this is a debossing, as you can see. So that's pretty good. Now, if we want to make it into a watermark, what we could do is couch another piece of paper on top of that. And let's see if we can do that. Make sure everything lines up. We've swirled. And let it drain. Use a sponge on the bottom. I can remove the decal. See, it just gives a nice little edge there. In handmade paper, you know, not all the particles are going to be the same, so you have, you know, individual little pieces sometimes that are a little bigger. That just creates the charm, and then you know it's real handmade paper. So we're going to try and couch this right on top of that star. And then you can remove this part. So it's handy to have a few of these pieces of screen handy. And then lots and lots of, this will take a while. Josh will put on one of his beautiful videos. All right, so you can see the watermark. I guess it's one of the enigmatic ones. You can see some of the letters, but not very clearly. And this one, you can see the P. And there's a little bit of paper in the way. And for this one. So I think you have to have very consistent paper. But that's okay, I don't care. It's the whole point is that this is a watermark and this is how to produce it. And you'll just have to be, you know, do a few paper pieces until you get one that doesn't have, more like this, doesn't have so many lumps in it. Okay. So this is paper that has the star embossed or debossed into it. And you can see the edges here. And that's without the second sheet, right? This is just debossing. Now the last one, I dried all these with my handheld little heater tool, and this had 2 layers, so we couched another layer on top of the star design, and it did show up. It's a bit thicker of a paper. It's still not quite dry yet, and it's a debossing because the ridges are going in. On the other side, of course, so it would be some parts are up, some parts are down. So it's both debossing and embossing. This might be more visible. Now, it's less transparent, so it doesn't really work as a watermark, but as an embossing or debossing, it's pretty good. So this is something to try. And paper making is very meditative. It's a process. You know, you've got to dry things, you know, couching sometimes. You can also couch bigger pieces just by laminating the pieces together. And you could have, say, your star design going all the way across here, right? So you could make plaques, you could make ornaments. There's probably no end of things you could make with handmade paper. So anyway, lots of fun. And you could even do it as multimedia. If you very lightly brushed pastel over this, all those ridges would show up. Now it's something to try. and or even watercolor or acrylic. Just keep a light touch because it is handmade paper, and unless you've put a starch product in it, like methyl cellulose, it will, you know, if you re-wet it, it is quite fragile. So, but you know, this at this level, even though it's very fragile, you know, it has a fair amount of strength. The pieces that are in there are watercolor paper, which is 100% rag. So, you know, I can pull it quite considerably and it holds up. So make some paper. We'll catch you another time here at Adventures here at Shoreline Studio. Take care of yourselves and your families and be kind to one another.